EA have put their foot in their mouth once again over loot boxes. Amazon's game ambitions have hit a pretty major snag. We've got an update to the Randy Pitchford situation and much more. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Roundup, the Tuesday and Friday show where we take you through all of the important gaming news. This has been quite the spicy week thanks to EA, so you know what, let's just get going with their exciting surprise. Yeah, here we go. There was a UK Parliament hearing on addiction and gambling within games. Of course, that's something that we really can say now is just a part of a wave of worldwide scrutiny. Well, EA's representative had this to say.
Consider loot boxes to be an ethical feature.
First, we don't call them loot boxes. I think that was...
Whatever term you wish to apply to them, do you consider them ethical?
So what we look at as surprise mechanics. But I think it's important to look at this. So if you go to a store that sells a lot of toys and you do a search for surprise toys, what you'll find is that this is something people enjoy. They enjoy surprises. We do think the way that we have implemented these kind of mechanics, and FIFA, of course, is our big one, our FIFA Ultimate Team and our packs, is actually quite ethical and quite fun, enjoyable to people.
Yeah, she didn't call them loot boxes. Instead, they are surprise mechanics. Going on to draw comparisons to Kinder Eggs, which are banned in America for being a choking hazard, and blind bags, you know, where you can get a random toy in a bag from a toy store. There's quite a lot of hypocrisy going on here. Really, there's a lot going on here, because here's the deal. EA, you do call them loot boxes. You're literally lying to Parliament, and now that I think about it as, I guess, technically a UK citizen, I should probably be pretty ticked off that you are lying to Parliament. Now, why do I say lying? Well, go back to the marketing materials for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. You know, where you use the lack of a loot box as a selling point. EA, you didn't say no surprise mechanics, you said no loot boxes. Go back to the marketing of Anthem. Once again, what do they say? No loot boxes. That is their selling point. So this essentially is flat out lies. This is flat out lies that is essentially trying to pull the wool over those lawmakers in Parliament who, are not going to be super clued in to gaming stuff in general. It is so demonstrably false that they don't call them loot boxes because they literally, in their own marketing materials, have called them loot boxes. Now, I'm pretty sure that for FIFA, they don't call them loot boxes, but let's be real, in FIFA, they are loot boxes, and they are worse than Overwatch loot boxes, or really most loot boxes, because in FIFA, they are loot boxes that affect gameplay mechanics, right? What FIFA does is it sells you different quality AI profiles in a loot box for a competitive game, to the point where the people who really want to be into FIFA esports, they have to spend a really stupid amount of money. Like, the real pros are spending upwards of $1,000 more on FIFA Ultimate Team because they need the players. And yeah, sure, it's got the trading system and all of that, but fundamentally, FIFA Ultimate Team is pretty much one of the worst loot box systems that exists in gaming. It's just that it is for a non-core audience. That said, I do know from hearing parents actually in real life talk about this system, and also from a lot of people I know who would play FIFA but wouldn't really, I guess, identify as being a gamer, that they're also actually getting pretty darn ticked off at those systems. So, frankly, if EA tries to just continue pushing this, I really think that bubble is going to burst. Now, that said, are they the same as blind bags? Well, a blind bag, right, that's, physical items that have value, which actually might mean that the blind bags are more of a gambling incentive because you can technically cash out by selling them in eBay. But being real, I deeply dislike blind bags. They often do feel like they're pressuring kids into a chance-based spend, often driven by schoolyard social pressures, something that the companies behind the blind bags are keenly aware of. So saying that they're just like blind bags and they're okay and they're fun and surprising, that's not a good thing. Also, there are more elements to a game. Okay, so different ways of the loot boxes tying into mechanics and balancing, just like with FIFA, where the loot boxes impact gameplay to a large degree. There is just more psychological manipulation that can be done with something like that in the context of a game than can be with a blind bag from Toys R Us. Now on that, addiction was also covered, with Epic's legal counsel saying that anything, even good things like exercise, can be taken to an unhealthy level. And yes, He's right. You can get guys in a gym with body dysmorphia who are convinced that they're small and they're just going in there for gains all the time to the detriment of other aspects of their life. Now, when a lawmaker said that playing a game for 10 hours straight has to be unhealthy, both the Epic and EA reps answered back, with the EA one saying, and that they mean this in a very respectful way, but how can I say that, right? How can I say that it's unhealthy? Has a doctor said that playing for 10 hours straight is unhealthy? So that's what the rep said. But here's the thing. A doctor will tell you that sitting at your work desk is unhealthy. So yeah, I mean, heck, a couch, that's going to be worse for your back and posture than a good office chair that you're doing computer work at for 7 hours a day. Now, they went on to talk about how some people want to train hard, maybe 10 hours a day, in order to be esports competitive. And that's totally fair. You're allowed to do that. It's a good thing to pursue if you want to do that. But I mean, to compare it to, say, football, it's not super fair. We've got to be real with ourselves here. Training for football is going to be more inherently good for your health than 10 hours a day of FIFA. Now, don't worry, I'm writing this video after guzzling down a Greggs sausage roll and a Dr. Pepper, so I'm by no means a saint with all of this. I just think that what we're seeing here is these gaming representatives just shirking all responsibility in general. Now, on the topic of playing games too much, well, I don't think that's really the game's fault. I think that's down to people not making good life decisions. I don't think that's really the industry's fault too much, and I think the industry does a good job of providing parental controls, and I'm more sympathetic with what the industry rep said on that topic. But with loot boxes, I mean, you could say the same. It's down to self-control and not partaking in the loot boxes, right? I think that maybe being too purely in the individual responsibility thing there could be potentially missing out on the gambling-like psychological loops that can really prey on some people and, you know, the systems that people can get trapped into there. So it's hard to come to a really solid conclusion, but all I can say is that personally, I hate loot boxes. I hate what they do to games, and I also do think the games should be enjoyed in a pretty healthy manner. But heck, that's not going to stop me from going hard every now and then. I know that when Last of Us 2 comes out, yeah, I'm going to finish that probably 25-hour game in the span of one weekend. So, with all that said, what do you think about the loot box situation and about the sort of health and addiction situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Next up, though, we've got everyone's favorite banter lad. It's Randy Pitchford. His legal case against Wade Collender, well, Wade Collender's one against him, that has progressed, with Collender's legal reps filing a 76-page submission that contains an amendment to the Borderlands 3 contract that references a $12 million payment and an additional $3 million payment to Gearbox's CFO. Now, this is the headline-grabbing amount of money that Collender's camp had claimed was Pitchford taking employee bonuses that the publisher sent to Gearbox and moving that to his own company. Now, we've covered this case before. This is just an update, and I'm not going to do a full recap because I've already done it, and this video would be too long if we did. Now, of course, if Pitchford was doing that, it would be him stealing from Gearbox, and even with his level of ownership in Gearbox, that's still fraught with legal and ethical issues. Now, the bonus clause of the contract that was supplied does mention Pitchford and his CFO by name, which could legitimate the payments made, to them and how they ended up getting the money. However, it's clear that Collender's legal team don't think that's the case, because that's why they're bringing this to trial. So there's not too much to say here other than the trial is clearly moving forward. Has Randy broken the law? That is for the courts to decide. Is he a bit of a tool? Aye, it seems like he is. Next though, let's move on to some other EA news. So, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order had a bit of a strange demo. So we had this demo that kind of looked a bit more Uncharted-like, in that it was hyperlinear. And that was quite odd, because we then saw a number of interviews and things like that where they were saying that Metroidvania-style games were actually a really, really large inspiration. And it was just quite weird seeing that those things just did not line up with what we saw from the demo. Well, it has been, talked about on Giant Bombcast, their very, very long-running podcast, the Giant Bomb Run, that basically from actually playing the game, yeah, the game itself and its structure is far more similar to those Metroidvania-like inspirations than it is to Uncharted, and that pretty much what EA showed, yes, it was a slice of gameplay, but it's not one that was representative of the overall game experience. This is quite interesting to me, and in fact, it does have me significantly more interested in this game. I was totally down for a good 15-20 hour long story campaign that's, set in a sort of extended Star Wars universe. I think that could have been really fun, but I will admit I thought it was a pretty safe bet. From what we hear now, well, you've got your main character, you've got your crewmates, and you've got your ship. And at least within segments of the game, you can go to planets in any order. So it seems like if we're going by these Metroidvania style inspirations, you could go to planet C and maybe unlock something or progress your character, which would mean that you could go back to planet B, progress through a level, and maybe open up a new area that maybe has something else in it. Now, if that is what that game's going to end up living up to, I'll tell you what, I'm actually pretty darn interested. And then the only other thing about this game is that there is no human, delimbing going on. Of course, if you hit someone in the arm with a lightsaber, their arm's not going to stay attached to their body. That is not something that's going to be in this game, and apparently that is directly from Lucasfilm. I think that's rather unfortunate. If they're going to be doing a more dark tale, I feel like stuff like that should kind of be a part of it. And even thinking back to the George Lucas ones, which people laugh at those for being, children's films. But they did have bits of people getting chopped off, right, fairly regularly, and it definitely did make the lightsabers feel a bit more like, oh, that's kind of powerful. So it's a little bit of a pity we're not getting that, but you know what? It's probably not going to ruin the game, so let's move on. So next, we've got an update to the Amazon situation. Of course, as we covered in our most recent episode of the Roundup, a decently significant number of staff were actually cut from Amazon Game Studios, and that's really made a lot of people wonder what the hell's going on there. Well, some more sources have spoken out to the press, and through that we've learned a few things. So first up, their fantasy sports game, that has been cancelled, and also another unannounced game has been cancelled. And the sources are pretty much leveling things at the Lumberyard engine. So Lumberyard started off as CryEngine, then Amazon picked it up, forked it. It's its own fork, I suppose, that they're developing. And of course, it's used internally by Amazon Game Studios on their games. It's also very notably used, and I mean, I say notably to the point where there is an active lawsuit, I believe, of course, Star Citizen. Now, Star Citizen is using a heavily modified version of the Lumberyard engine. They had to do a lot of things like, double precision, and there's just a lot of very interesting technical challenges with that game. I am going to be doing something on that because that game gets a lot of stuff. All I can say is I log into that maybe 2 or 3 times a week and have a decent amount of fun on the current alpha. So there is stuff there. There's a lot to talk about, but anyway, that's just another game that is running on Lumberyard. Now, on the topic of this, essentially, it seems a bit like the Frostbite situation, where the Lumberyard engine was just not really capable of doing the things they wanted to do in the multiplayer realm. But seemingly just the developments that Cloud Imperium Games have made are just not compatible with what Amazon Game Studios wants to do, or maybe they weren't able to come to an agreement or something like that. But essentially, that is acting as a roadblock, with one source saying that it pretty much is like, driving the train while you're putting the tracks down sort of in front of the train as you're going, where they're trying to make the game, but a lot of the tech work is still being done to allow the game to exist, which just makes for a very, very challenging development process. A development process that I would say is actually quite unlike, say, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is in Unreal Engine 4, very much using familiar tools and techniques. And it seems like they're not having that happen with Lumberyard, and that's been a major reason why they've ran into so many development issues. Of course, that is something that a lot of developers at Electronic Arts will be all too familiar with. Of course, with its Frostbite engine being really wonderful for Battlefield, a first-person shooter, because of course the Frostbite engine was designed by DICE for Battlefield. But, as of course BioWare would find out, trying to take that first-person shooter 64-player game and turning that into a Dragon Age single-player RPG or a Mass Effect game, a little bit more challenging. So it seems like that's essentially what's going on with Amazon. And then finally, we've got just an interesting little tidbit from Rod Fergusson. Now, he's currently heading up the Coalition. That is a new studio that was established to handle the Gears of War franchise. Of course, he does come from Epic, and there's a fair amount of history with just a lot of the staff who ended up leaving Epic over the years. But with him, it's quite fun because he basically said he would have cancelled Fortnite if he was still in the company. Now, if he had have cancelled Fortnite, you know what? Gaming would look pretty bloody different, wouldn't it? The Epic Games Store stuff, that may not have advanced as much because they would not have had such a humongous war chest. So there's a lot of interesting just repercussions that decision could have had. Now, would Rod have been right to cancel Fortnite? Actually, on paper, yes. Yes, I think so, because Fortnite Save the World isn't great. I mean, it wasn't great when it came out. It didn't really get great reviews. It did not perform that well. Fortnite only ended up being the worldwide sensation that it is now because they copied PUBG and piggybacked off that entire game format. That was not a part of the plan for that game. That was something where, oh dear, Fortnite Save the World isn't doing that well. We've got all these mechanics. Let's do a battle royale. We'll see how it happens. And yeah, they just so happen to maybe make the biggest game that there is right now. Very odd turn of events, very low probability, all of that stuff happening. But it does show that Rod may have been right to have cancelled Fortnite based on everything that he knew and how the original version of Fortnite actually did. Yet, that ability to quickly pivot, to react to market conditions, that obviously worked very well for Epic. And I think that does just show you the importance of maintaining agility, right, if you want to be a competitive organization, and that always makes me think about the least agile company in the world, seemingly, Blizzard Entertainment. But anyway, tangents aside, there is one final thing to talk about on the topic of Fortnite, and that is a 76% viewership decrease for the Fortnite Pro-Am. So that's a sort of like professional amateur tournament thing that involves celebrities, and it just has had a lot less viewers this year. And I think the reason is pretty simple. I don't think it's because Fortnite is dying. Fortnite is a very strong game. It's doing very well. However, I would imagine that its monthly user growth has really slowed down. And that means that it, as a cultural tidal wave, that's less of a thing. There was, say, the novelty of people tuning in to watch Drake and Ninja play Fortnite. Well, that's happened. And when that happens again with another celebrity, it's not groundbreaking, it's not new anymore. And that means that people aren't really going to care. And I think that's why the Fortnite Pro-Am has sort of been a bit smaller. It's not because Fortnite's doomed, it's just because Fortnite is now the size of Fortnite. It's not Fortnite holding a torch for gaming that is a massive cultural thing. Pretty much. So with that, that is today's episode of The Roundup. A lot of very interesting topics, sad news for Amazon, real just typically frustrating stuff from EA, but I mean, hey, at least Star Wars Fallen Jedi is actually looking a little bit more on the up now that we're learning a little bit more about its game format and what we could actually be getting as opposed to what they showed us. So let me know what you think about any and all of the topics talked about today, and with that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.